afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Sorry, there's a little confusion with me being here. I guess the only downside to being married is if your spouse gets sick, you can rest assured you're going to get sick too. And so Regina got sick earlier this week, and so I caught it. And so I was just telling Pastor Remy that I was going to be a little late. Or, yeah, not really. Okay, anyway, so our theme for this year, as we know, is proclaiming the love of God. And this month we're focusing on love stories in the Bible. And so there's a lot to choose from. I mean, really, if you wanted to, you could say, here, the entire Bible is a love story towards us. But I just want to focus on just one right now. And it's a well-known one, and it's short, but it's about Jacob and Rachel. And so I'm going to... voice. I'm going to start in Genesis 29, but I'm just going to catch you up to speed as to where we are. So as we know, Jacob is the son of Isaac, and Jacob was brothers with Esau, and they were going to have a blessing given to them from Isaac. And so Jacob, he tricked Isaac, and he's like, I'm hairy. I don't know how people don't recognize people in the Bible. Something. But he's just like, I'm hairy like Esau, so you know that I'm him. And so Isaac gave him the blessing. Esau, being the very mild-mannered person, of course wanted him dead. Because that's what they do in the Bible. As soon as they get a little angry, they're just like, I'm going to kill you. And they kill each other very quickly. And so he wanted that to happen. So Rachel, his mom, Isaac's wife, told Jacob, he's like, flee from here. Go with my brother, Laban. I think that's how you pronounce it, right? Laban. So she said, go with my brother, Laban. And he's in Padan Aram. And so he leaves his home because his brother wants him dead. And he's going to go look for a wife in Padan Aram. And so he gets there, and that's where we are right now in Genesis 29. So let's go to Genesis 29, let's start around verse 13. So, as soon as Laban heard the news about Jacob, his sister's son, he hurried to meet him. He embraced him and kissed him and brought him to his home. And there Jacob told him all these things. Then Laban said to him, you're my own flesh and blood. After Jacob had stayed with him for a whole month, Laban said, just because you are a relative of mine, should you work for me for nothing? Tell me what your wages should be. So that was already a good thing, because as we saw, Jacob wasn't idle while he was there. Well, he wasn't just like hanging out and chilling with his uncle in fear of his brother killing him for a month. He was working while he was there. So he's a good guy. He's working. Verse 16. Now, Laban had two daughters. The name of the older was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. Leah had weak, or in some translations, fragile eyes, but Rachel had a lovely figure and was beautiful. Jacob was in love with Rachel and said, I'll work for you 7 years in return for your younger daughter. So now let's just pause for just a moment and just stop and just appreciate the love he must have had for this girl who he just saw and appreciated her lovely figure. He saw her and he's like, oh my goodness, she is so beautiful this was not Laban's idea. He did not say, you want my daughter? Work 7 years. No, Jacob approached Laban and said, I will work 7 years. He didn't even try to bargain. He didn't try to say, like, could I have Rachel? Just, because we're related or something, just as a gift to me. He might have been able to do that. He might have been able to give a gift or something, but no, his very first idea that came out of his mouth is like 7. Why 7? That's such a high number. It's like maybe a few months, maybe 2 years. I mean, that's how long I dated Regina before I got married. It's like about 2 years or something, but 7, that's a huge amount of time, amount of work. And let's keep going, because I have more to say about that. Verse 19. Laban said, "It's better that I give her to you than to some other man. Stay here with me." So Jacob served 7 years to get Rachel, but they seemed only like a few days to him because of his love for her.
Wow.
And so that is just something amazing, because the intensity, the intentionality, and not just that, but the purity in his work. I could not date Regina for 7 years. That would be too tempting to do. I don't think anyone could date their former spouse, then boyfriend, girlfriend, for 7 years. You'd have to be separated by a state. If you saw them every day, you'd just be like, oh, let's be married already. It's just, he had intentionality. He was just focused on what he desired, and he pursued her relentlessly in those 7 years of work and just toiling for his uncle. That's just intense. And it's nice that just looking at this, that in a way, in a part, does depict Jesus' love for us and how he pursues us in such a way that just blows our minds. It's like, from our human perspective, 7 years is a lot, but you could think of it on the scope of Jesus, where it's like for an eternity's amount of time before we existed, because he existed an eternity's amount of time before we existed, eons upon bigger words, waiting for us. And then to come onto and to become flesh and vulnerable to death, to pursue us, that is just in itself an amazing love story. And so this is just a human scale where we can actually grasp the idea. It's like 7 years, I can hold on to that. Eternity is too much for me to understand. But 7 years is a long time to pursue someone in work. Okay. And what I'm going to be focusing on is that verse where he said, in verse 20, that the days or the years felt like a few days because of his love for her. But I'm going to continue and finish his story. Verse 21. Then Jacob said to Laban, "Give me my wife. My time is completed, and I want to make love to her." He knew what he wanted. He's like, I've waited 7 years. I am ready for this. I've been preparing for 7 years. Verse 22. So Laban brought together all the people of the place and gave a feast. But when evening came, he took his daughter, Leah, and brought her to Jacob, and Jacob made love to her. Now, I don't know how he did not recognize the woman he was chasing after for 7 years. I guess they just weren't as smart in Bible times. Maybe he had a lot to drink or something. I don't know. Maybe Dr. Mike might know how they weren't as smart back then or something. But because as we see, we skip to 25. He says, when morning came, there was Leah. Oh my goodness, I didn't expect to see you in the morning for some reason. So Jacob said to Laban, he's like, "What is this you've done to me? I served you for Rachel, didn't I? Why you deceived me?" And it's true. Laban, he did him dirty. That was not okay. What he did, that was wrong. He deceived him. He lied to him. He was just a jerk to him. 7 years. Like, give me my 7 years back. I didn't want this girl with the fragile eyes. I wanted the girl with the lovely body figure. So we go to verse 26, and Laban replied, "It is not our custom to give our younger daughter in marriage before the older one. Finish this daughter's bridal week, then we will give you the younger one also in return for another 7 years of work." And so Laban, it's like, sure, at the time it was legitimately the custom of the time for the older daughter to be married first, but still, that is 7 years. He could have just easily told someone else, like, yeah, this is my younger daughter, or this is my older daughter, right there. He could have done anything, but he so chose to deceive Jacob, who worked for him for 7 years, for the sake of this custom. And for the sake of polygamy, which is not acceptable in our world today. Then it was okay. Of course, we don't approve of it now. But he just the worst. So we go on to 28. And Jacob did so. He finished the week with Leah, and Laban gave him his daughter, Rachel, to be his wife. Laban gave his servant Bilhah to his daughter Rachel as her attendant. And Jacob made love to Rachel also, and his love for Rachel was greater than his love for Leah. And he worked Laban another 7 years. And so that came after he was already married to Rachel. So he worked 7 years to get to Rachel, and then he worked 7 years after he was married to her. So that's a total of 14 years, all for one person, all for the love of this one individual that Jacob had that is so fierce that you don't see that outside of an example like Jesus, who loves us so much in the Bible. So working 7 years. And so I wanted to go back up to the verse I said I was going to focus on. Sorry, I'm just making a bunch of gross sounds right now. Verse 20, where we look at Jacob when he was working for Rachel. At the very start it says, so Jacob served the 7 years. He didn't complain about it. There have been instances in the Bible where people are like, why do I have to do this? Or they just are angry about something. He willingly did this for her. But the 7 years seemed like only a few days to him because of his love for her. And so I assure you, if he just decided one day, hey, I want to go and work for my uncle Laban. I just want to work for him. I need money. I'm a man in this society. I need to work. I need to make a living. I need money. I need food. I need stuff. And so he would work for 7 years. I promise you it would not have gone up and felt like a few days. It would have felt like 7 years of work. It would have felt just tiring. It would have been exhausting. But in this short passage, and I love that it's only one verse, that it only felt like a few days. And so what does this have to do with proclaiming the love of Christ, you query? And so we see it that when we look at ministry, sometimes we do like to puff it up and seem like, oh my goodness, it's just, I'm so amazing for doing ministry. Or we try to make ministry look like, oh, it's this thing that only a select few can do, that it's so nice, and then you get all this adoration for it. But no, the reality is ministry is work. It is work. It is God's work, but it is work nonetheless. People have been in ministry for years. Pastor Burmey's been in ministry for 30 years. I'm sure, and I know, he's experienced hardships in it. It is not pretty. It is not nice. You don't get just, oh, pastor, oh, person, you are just so nice to me all the time. I have nothing but compliments. I never want to complain at you. I've never been offended by you. All these nice things. That does not happen in ministry. That doesn't happen at work. When we proclaim the love of Christ, for those who have done it, you've gotten rejected before, I'm positive. Not everyone accepts it, and that's okay. But it can be work at times, all the time. Just like when Jacob was working for Laban, it was, in essence, it was just work. However, the thing that made it different was his love for Rachel. And so, when we do ministry, because you can treat ministry as work, you can treat it as just something you're doing out of your own human spirit, but you're going to get tired. You're going to get burnt out. You're going to get exhausted. You're going to quit if you're just doing it off of your own human effort, off your own human energy. You're going to get tired, just like if Laban was working for 7 years, and just like us, Jacob, just like us, if we are working in a job that we hate, we're quitting quick. We can do it for maybe a few months, maybe a year or two, but if you just dread going to sleep because you know you have to wake up to go to this job that you just detest with all your heart, and you just grit your teeth through the day to get through work. I know there have been people that have been through that. Without a doubt, I don't even need to see a show of hands, but it happens that we go to a work that we just hate. Oh, and it's tiring and it's exhausting, and so we quit because it's just work. However, if we are driven by a force outside of ourselves, so like Jacob, the love for Rachel, or when we do ministry, when we're driven and we are compelled by the love of Christ, then it goes by in a second. When we go off of the love of Christ that he has for everyone else and that he has for us, when we go off of that overabundance, excess of love that he has, we won't get tired. It'll go by in a few moments. Pastor Burmey's been serving for 30 years, and I'm sure that just felt like a moment suddenly. If you ever go back and reflect on it, or anyone here who's been in ministry for over a decade, it just goes by in a second. And there have been, as Pastor Burmey says, and I've learned that statistically most pastors quit after 2 years because it's just too much of a burden, because it's hard, because they can sometimes do it for the wrong reasons. They can also just do it because they think of it as work that they're doing, which it is. You're just going to end up doing work. but they're doing it without love in their heart, and then they get exhausted. And so when we proclaim the love of God, when we go out and do that ministry, we can do it as work. We can. And you might see some results, but you yourself are going to get burnt out. And so that's why we have to do it with love, filling and exuding and just overflowing from our hearts. We have to do it with the intentionality of Christ's love for everyone who doesn't know his love, for all those people who have yet to experience this amazing love that Christ has. And so just as we see in this story of love about Jacob, when we do work for 7 years, or metaphorically our life, when we're in heaven, when eons have passed, we'll see our life and be like, oh, that just felt like that our entire life, because it will. I can't understand it. I logically can write it out in my head and just be like, that makes sense, but emotionally it doesn't set in. But when we do this, when we pass through this life, we look back and we see that we did this ministry, we did this work for God, for love, for the reason of love, so that we can love others, so that the love that God gives us, we can just keep on passing forward, and it will just seem so easy. Amen?
Amen.